welcome to the Sheffield Doc Fest Masterclass for Marc. My name is Mehelli Modi. I'm not a filmmaker or a writer or a critic. I'm here because I simply love film and I really care about Marc's work. So I think Rachel, as our producer, felt that it might just bring a slightly different feel to this session. I'm the founder of a label called Second Run DVD. We release films that we've seen and loved over the years, which we want other people to see. This year, we released, well, I'll step back a bit because this year, British documentary filmmaking and the tradition of British documentary filmmaking has been really important for me, in the past and now. And although we release mainly fiction films with a number of documentaries, I felt that we should this year begin to present British documentary filmmakers whose work often not gets ignored, but gets seen very little, a television screening or 2 television screenings, and then it's lost. So we decided to start this year with releases of acclaimed British documentary filmmakers, and absolutely delighted that we could release Kim Longinotto's work first, and a couple of months ago, 3 films by Marc. Marc has made, I think in the catalogue it shows 4 films, but Marc's made about 8 films. And for me, those films kind of have quietly and without any fuss become a body of work that looks at lives often overlooked by others. And I think that's why it's really important that what we talk about today kind of brings that aspect across to you. The films, I won't go through the films Marc has done, but to create such a body of work, you need it to be grounded and real, and that's something that Marc does very well, and it needs the strength continuously to take an idea and carry it all the way through to like a filmic conclusion and getting it broadcast. And that's why for today's masterclass, I thought we would deal with it kind of in that way. So what we'll do is we'll have 3 sections. We'll have pre-production, where we can talk about the number of things that go with the idea, the production of the work, and then the post-production. Because that's quite a lot, we'll have questions, and please, I hope you'll have questions for Marc at the end of each section rather than leaving everything to the end, if that's okay. Okay. The other thing I've been asked to say is that when you ask a question, please state your name. And because we have a limited amount of time, it's going to be my job to move you on, so kind of please be gentle with me. Okay, so pre-production. What's really fascinating for me is, as somebody who doesn't make films, is what interests you, Marc, in pursuing an idea? In a sense, what does that idea have to embody to make it something you care about and want to do?
It's quite a broad thing in the beginning. I guess when an idea emerges, and often it's very, very vague, it's the vagueness, in a sense, and the openness that draws me to it. So what I mean by that is that if it seems too defined and too obvious and predictable from the beginning, then it feels that it's like, for me, it's going to be too closed. So things are very, very vague. I mean, an idea could start with a place, or usually a place actually, which means something to me, and it seems to suggest a deeper theme, more universal themes within that place. And then, the idea develops through immersing myself in that world, probably with this initial thought of what that place may represent and the possibilities which, I could find there. And then it starts to come alive when I meet characters that I respond to and feel some connection with. I think when you spoke about the strength, if you like, you define the strength of the films. I mean, for me, that's really about finding people who mean something to me, and that you know, their lives, within their lives and their situations, it evokes or provokes something very, very personal, and that's could be many different things, but you know, quite basic, universal, human dramas, struggles, emotions.
But you see, your first film was made in around 2000.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, has that changed? Because there is a line running through all your work, which to me is to do with the characters and, as you said, the place in which they're set. But have you found that things in your mind, your ideas, and have you moved away from your original thinking, and there's just this human part that continues following those people?
Well, I mean, when I made the Lift film, it was a really happy accident. It was an idea that came about through working on a feature film, and one of the locations we were using was in a tower block, and the lift was, you know, how we accessed that apartment in that tower block, and you know, the idea came initially through in that situation, but it was a sort of happy accident in the sense that I didn't understand the idea in itself. I didn't understand what it would mean to make a film in a lift, and to get that sort of unity of the form and the style and the content. And in a way, that's such a pure idea, which again, I reiterate, I had no idea that it would be. You know, when the doors open and people come in and the doors close again, it's just, everything's sort of perfect. And, you know, once I understood that, and not even during the making of it, but sort of more in the editing and later on afterwards, you know, my filmmaking was hugely influenced by that. And in a sense, you know, I always feel that I'm trying to find that purity again. But, you know, I can't spend the rest of my life standing in lifts. And, you know, and I spent 2 years trying to find suitable alternatives and never came up with a... I tried the trains, and it didn't work as well because, for me, it didn't work as well because, you know, maybe I should have taken one carriage rather than lots of trains all over the place. But there is something very, you know, just focused and coherent about finding a space. And, you know, I went on to, you know, discover a town in Calais, but in the editing and in the shooting, you know, I was desperately trying to give the whole thing a sort of sense of unity, and that's remained, you know, through me. I mean, it was a little bit different with the film about the rabbi and his wives and Someday My Prince Will Come, because the initial idea wasn't as broad and vague as some of my other films. But generally, I am more attracted to ideas that, you know, are just open-ended, and then the struggle is, for me, is, you know, and later on for my editor David, is to make that cohere, you know.
I don't know how many people have seen Lift, but it's like one of those films which, when you see it, you say, gosh, I should have made that. It's just, you know, it has that amazing putting together, as Marc says. You know, he says it's a happy accident.
It is, really, because, I mean, I didn't understand the idea, or, you know, what would happen and the way people would relate to each other, and the fact that actually I didn't have to go anywhere or do anything, really. I mean, of course, there's a lot of intervention behind the scenes to bring out what I want to bring out, but basically, you know, you never feel, it's effortless for me, in its sort of simplicity. You know.
But then as you move on, how do you decide the relevance of a particular character?
Yeah.
I mean, does it come out of the research, or does it...
Yeah, no, it comes out of I mean, you know, if you take the film that I just made in the city, I mean, you know, that place has some kind of meaning to us all. You know, it's quite suggestive, and it has a resonance, and I think that, you know, when I'm out there looking around, all those, of course, you know, I mean, it's not my world strictly, but in a way, I'm part of it, and I'm, in a sense, looking for archetypes, but then to go beyond that. So, you know, when I discovered Norman, for example, I think we're going to see a clip from Norman. So, you know, for me, he seemed, just through looking at him, he seemed to embody something about that place that I felt, you know, could not only reveal something about that place, but also reveal how that place shapes a character. So then I start talking and discover more about that person, and you know, then it becomes a dialogue between him and other people that I discover.
So in a way, the research part kind of mixes together with you filming. Filming is part of your research as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you know, although we're artificially, you know, breaking up this, I mean, the only thing that's, and maybe even becoming less so, the only thing that's quite separate to a point is, you know, editing and music. But even more recently, in the last 2 films that I've done with David, we've edited for 4 weeks, had, you know, a break in between, and I've been shooting during the editing. So actually, the whole thing is becoming more and more, you know, sort of meshed together. And I mean, that's good and bad, because sometimes, you know, you can go out and think, okay, I need that, and, you know, when you're so far down the line, you can be very specific about what you want. And you know, in the Barking film, I got a little bit nervous about that, because I didn't want to close off anything, you know. Yes. Again, it's this need to sort of try and encapsulate everything. But there does come a point where having that focus and that clear idea of what you're looking for, you know, is really useful to make the whole thing cohere, because, you know, it's sort of endless otherwise.
Mark just mentioned Norman, who's a character in Mark's latest film, Men of the City. We've got a collection of clips to show you to illustrate the discussion and the points, but I think this is the only clip we'll show you from Men of the City, because it's really a film you should see. It's also full of surprises, and I think it kind of goes a little further even. It takes the same base that Mark has, but pushes it much further. So this will be the only clip, but Norman, who is the character you'll meet now, perhaps, I don't know whether you want to speak about Norman a little bit before we see him or after.
Maybe after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So could we have clip 1, please? Okay. Are our heads in the way, or okay? No. Fine.
What kind of person is working in the city made you?
Resentful. Sometimes it's all right, sometimes more resentful than anything, perhaps, yeah. More resentful.
What do you mean by that?
Having to give up life, things you'd probably want to do, but couldn't do. Sold a dream that was probably never there. It would always be just round the corner, it never was. But every dog has his day.
How many years have you been here?
This is my 32nd year.
What do you do?
What do? I collect money for lawyers, attorneys, loss adjusters for a commission.
Did you ever dream about another life?
Oh yes. When I was young and naive, my dad worked at Ford's. He said, "Go work in the city, son, because you won't have to work as hard as I do." If we were alive today, I think I'd be sitting down having a quiet chat to him. I think you got that one a bit wrong, Dad.
Yeah, it's just, you know, you can see it's going to be character-driven, but it's the landscape where it's placed that kind of makes it feel even more. I mean, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking myself what initially I was attracted to with Norman, and it is that thing of, often you start with a face. You know, you look at somebody, and I've met a lot of characters in my films where it's sort of a glance across the street, and something about them just draws you in, and that is to do with being in a place that you've got some ideas about, and meeting people that seem to grow out of that landscape. You know, often filmmakers talk about, they go to sort of rural locations to find characters that they describe as sort of, growing out of that landscape. And for me, Norman was that, but in the city. And you just know that, when you meet somebody like that, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff underneath that's going to be, human emotions that are going to be really interesting to explore. And it's not just for the sake of you know, of telling a very personal story about Norman, but, you know, with that thing in my mind of how this place is shaping him. So very early on, I knew that he decided, actually I maybe shouldn't spoil it because if you haven't seen the film, but there's something, you know, things in his life that I knew, that I discovered early on just through chatting to him, that I knew I would want to kind of draw out in order to kind of express something about how this place has shaped his life, and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, and we, initially a researcher, a guy who's not here unfortunately, but, you know, met Norman, but we'd had discussions about the kind of people that I might be interested in. You know, we would walk around the city and see a lot of very large men, and we had our, you know, eyes open to kind of try, you know, to talk to some of those people, because they did seem to me to, you know, as I say, embody something about that world. And maybe in terms of the filming, I should just, you know, that was I shot that scene quite early on in my relationship with Norman, and I think you can tell that, you know, his is quite raw in a sense, and his, you know, there's a familiarity, but not too much familiarity between us. I think that decision when to start filming is actually really important. Sometimes, you know, I try filming early on and that scene doesn't work, and we find another way to introduce the character into the film. But often that early meeting can be quite interesting because it's quite intense, and it gives you somewhere to go. By the end of the film, they're, you know, telling you things on a different level, and you feel as an audience that you've gone on a journey. And it's not always an obvious narrative journey of an unfolding story, but it's more of a, you know, journey inside.
But because you do that, because you have a journey, and all your characters go through this journey. In fact, the audience goes through it with you and with the characters. Does that mean at the research stage there are a number of characters you've met who you just, as it were, leave behind?
Yeah, I mean, either sometimes people that you've filmed, but more often people that I've had chats with, and, you know, initial meetings. And I mean, it's a strange process because you're also very vulnerable in terms of, you know you've got to make a film, and sometimes you can be drawn to characters and you convince yourself that they're interesting, and then you find someone who's more interesting and they become less interesting. And, you know, and I mean, it's sort of endless because you could meet probably 20 Normans, and, you know, if you had more time, and at some point you make a decision. I make a decision to say, okay, this is the right person, and then I'll start looking for, you know, counterpoints, other characters that tell me something different, that are saying something different about the place.
Marc was talking about, again, and I started the conversation about characters in landscapes, and there's an absolutely perfect example here. It's from Calais, which is a film called Calais, the Last Border. And if we could have clip 2, perhaps we can talk about that a little bit after the clip.
I was the only one they take off the bus, you know, so that I needed a visa.
What did the immigration say to you?
I told them that Eurolines sold me the ticket, you know, and told me that I could go to London. They say that I shouldn't go to Eurolines, I should come to them first. Because it's them run things and not Euroline. Yeah. And they told me that they're going to turn me over to the French, and the French are going to drop me back to the Euroline station, but instead the French dropped me off in the border, in the bushes, 4 o'clock in the night, and I have to find my way to Elf. Now I'm on the border of France. I cannot go into England, you know, on the border of France and England, and looking at England and cannot go into England. On the border of France, waiting for a Euroline bus to take me back to Brussels. My dream was to go to England and make it, you know, as a big time chef. I want to show off Jamaican food, you know, cook some soups, chicken soup, beef soup, red pea soup, oxtail, curry goat, fricassee chicken, French fried chicken, rice and peas, white rice, dumpling and yam and banana. Show of Jamaican food, you know.
I mean, that for me is like, you know, the perfect situation where you take the character, you've got his story, you set him in a landscape and you find him in that landscape, which is the story. I just wonder how that happens.
Well, I mean, with Calais, actually the idea of the place is it's on different levels, because there's, you know, the real Calais is a complicated, you know, mixture of different things. But for me, when I went there, I wanted to make a film about Calais as a transient town. So I looked for spaces which would suggest that. And of course, this particular no man's land, you know, does that job. And I used to go there every day with a researcher and, you know, waiting for somebody to turn up who, for me, would be a character that I wanted to kind of follow up and, you know, and explore. And so in that situation, I had to react really quickly. So, you know, Paul turned up and we got chatting, and within 20 minutes, I decided to start filming with him. And in my, you know, it was actually sort of almost like writing a script on the spot. So I decided to just stay there with him for many hours, you know, until he could get the bus, which never turns up, back to where he came from. And it was, you know, in terms of, you know, the early idea of it, I just liked, you know, that particular landscape was very suggestive, and I then had to think about the story in that landscape. And at a point, you know, Paul could have got on a bus, an earlier bus, but I knew I wouldn't have enough material to tell a story about Paul, so I encouraged him to miss the bus, which becomes part of the story. And then later on, we're going to show a clip, if we have time, where, you know, his story develops. A woman turns up, and he's, you know, and it allows us to explore other sides of Paul's personality. The intervention thing, maybe that I've just hinted on, we probably will come back to a bit later. But it is important because, you know, there's initial idea there, and then you have to go further. And sometimes, you know, the cold reality of what you're faced with isn't allowing for me to express what I want to express. So at that point, I'll, you know, almost work with the character to find, you know, find a way to tell a story that's going to work. And of course, that's a, you know, they have to be complicit in that, and Paul was.
Yeah, I think we'll have a lot of questions about intervention, only because, for me, I kind of still scratch my head about that. And it's called documentary, so. There's another clip, very quickly, it's a short one, which is clip number 3, which is from the film called Someday My Prince Will Come. Now here it's very different in that the landscape's different, and it's children that Marc dealt with. I don't know how many people have seen that, but again, talks about the same the same aspects of Marc's work. The other one thing, which I have to say now, because we'll talk about it later, is that many of the characters you find seem to be coming from somewhere and going somewhere, and Marc somehow gets them in that space in between the journey in and then the journey out. And I think that's what resonates, for me anyway. And when you see it in the, you know, through the whole, rather than clips, it becomes much more, it does become much more resonant. Sorry, I shouldn't be talking so much. Okay. Can we have clip 3, please?
Ben's idea of happiness was digging with his mates for worms. Happiness wasn't Laura Ann being there. That was a contradiction in terms. You're cold. What's a jacket? Let me reach it, Mom. when it doesn't feel right, it feels like I want to rip my heart out and just throw it away.
This film was a little bit different because I'd been asked to make a film about first love, and there was a choice of, you know, really young kids, 5-year-olds, slightly older, and teenagers, and I was drawn to the youngest possible, but it didn't quite work out with the 5-year-olds. But anyway, part of the research, because we're talking about ideas, I mean, so there was a theme there, there was no story, it was pretty vague, but I made a point of casting a place as much as the kids, so, you know, it took 3 months to find those 2 streets in Cumbria, and through a process of a researcher that I was working with, getting lost. And then we met Laura Ann there, and my job then was to kind of pull out the story with her over a period of time. But as an idea, it was quite different in the sense that, you know, it was more limited than saying go to Calais or go to the city or be in a lift, because it had this initial brief of it should be a film about first love. I wanted to show that because it was just a slightly different take on, you know, some of the other pieces.
I just thought, because there's a number of things I'd like to ask, but perhaps it's a good time to take some questions on that first aspect of research and pre-production. So if anybody would like to ask anything at this stage, please do. Yes, there's a question there.
Hi, Danny Ben Moshe. I just wondered, you said often the ideas are very vague and you don't know where it's going to go, and they say, you know, the first thing in documentary is once you start shooting, you rip up the treatment. Is how do you persuade the broadcasters about your films, indeed, if you do that? And secondly, given that your voice is in a lot of the films, are you mic'd up as well? That's just a practical question.
Okay. I mean, the answer to the first question, I mean, it's really, I mean, I don't know, I mean, when I made the Lift film, it was commissioned on the back of a meeting, nothing was written down. And, you know, I just explained that I wanted to stand in a lift and make a film in a lift, and lucky enough, the commissioners at that time were sort of tickled by the idea, and they let me do it. And in that sense, it was really important because it, you know, out of that process, you know, came a film that worked and they were very happy with. And then I think that then becomes easier to go on to the next thing, because people then can see that actually you can do something like that. It is quite vague, and they can go with a vague idea, hopefully, you know, knowing that you can sort of pull something out of it that's going to work. And but often it's to do with relationships. I mean, Peter Dow commissioned the Lift film when he was at Channel 4, and then he also commissioned the second film because he was very happy with the first film. And I suppose over the years I've not worked with too many commissioning editors, but you know, in the process of building up a body of work, I think it's quite clear that people can see that, you know, they understand what you do, and you know, I suppose that's why, you know, I mean, you know, I do write stuff down, but you know, I don't know, in some ways it's worthless. It's just you have to write something down for somebody at some point. But the interesting writing comes much later on as you're shooting. For me, you know, it's a sort of notebook to myself about keeping everything on track and trying to kind of work out where the narrative's going. And it's not really a treatment that somebody else would read and get much out of. And I don't wear a radio mic. It's just my sound gets picked up usually. Occasionally I have to re-record another question, but you know, it just gets picked up in the onboard mic.
Is that unusual, just as for other documentary filmmakers here, getting the funding to make something in that way? Is that unusual, or would anyone like to comment? Okay. No one wants to say. Okay.
No, but I mean, I think for all of us, you know, for all filmmakers, I mean, you'll get known for making a particular kind of film, probably, or maybe you get known for doing many things, you know. But I've always felt that, you know, I mean, it's not something I've really thought about very much, it's just what I do, but I think the fact that there's a definite style and approach, you know, then it makes it easier for somebody else to understand what kind of films you make, even though they can be different in their initial, you know, conception, but basically there's something in the films that are mine, you know.
Yeah, I think that's why they work.
It's a question.
Sorry, there's a question there, please.
Hi, I'm a journalist. My name's Ed Lawrenson. I've got a question about just your approach to interviewing your subjects. In the clip that we saw with Norman, you're asking, I mean, it's not small talk, you're asking him about his desires and his dreams and, you know, really quite profound things. So how do you kind of feel when's the right time to open up?
That works on two levels, because this scene comes after about 12, 13, maybe even 15 minutes in, and you know, it's not a scene that you could open a film with. It's far too intimate. But by the time we get to meet Norman, we've probably, you know, we've gone so far in the overall narrative of the film that we're ready for that. Although it's the first time we've met him, you know,
not so much in the way that it's edited, but the practicalities.
Yeah, but it's two levels. So there's that, and then in practical terms, I mean, you know, I would have spent time with Norman and had a drink with him and explained to him what, you know, not in great detail, but he would have understood what my interest in him was. And actually, the first thing with Norman when we did start talking was that he was dead keen to express what he expresses there, you know. So, you know, he was ready for that. Sometimes with other characters, maybe it takes longer to build a relationship and a sense of trust to allow you to you know, to get to that level. But it's different with different people. But you can get there too quickly as well. You know, I mean, you know, it's quite difficult if you get too close too quickly, because then you've got nowhere to go. So you have to manage it somehow. It's quite a strange process in that way.
Any more questions? There's a question here. I think it might have to be the last question in this section.
Thanks. Mike Story. I'm just curious about whether or not your characters have seen your previous films, or whether you go out of your way to show them your previous work, and when you do, does that match up with the kind of initial discussions that you've had with them? Is that what they expect your body work to be like?
I never used to be honest, but more recently people ask, you know, it's sort of, people have films on their iPods, and, you know, and I don't know, there's sort of and I have no problem with doing that. And with all of the characters in the City film, actually, apart from it's a Bangladeshi guy that I was filming with, I think they all had seen something. And sometimes, I mean, it works on different levels. Even sort of the Corporation of London, you know, wouldn't give me access to the street cleaner that I wanted to film at first. And so I sent him the Lift film, and he saw that, and he realised that it was going to be that kind of film rather than something that was going to destroy the corporation. And so I would probably choose which film to show to people, depending on who they are and how I feel, what I feel they may respond to, and I have no problem in doing that. But it never used to be the case. It's just something that's happened quite recently, and it can be good actually. It's sort of, you know, it's quite honest. But there are some characters that I wouldn't do that with, if it was just a one-off situation where I wanted something a bit different to express something else. So.
Okay, we just move on, because none of this would work anyway unless the filming of it was done properly and gave you what you needed to put together to present an idea, a much larger idea. We'll just have a clip from Lift, because it's a wonderful film, but besides that, it's the first introduction to the characters, and that for me is so important in Marc's work, where it's that first introduction that draws you in. And, you know, I'd really like to learn and ask more about that. So if we could have clip number 5, please. Not 4, we just go to 5.
Ground floor. You can't come in yet. No. So taking pictures. You can't come in, I said. You can't. I'll send it down.
Please mind the door.
Johnny bleep mad here. This bleep business here. They're reporters. Well, hey, we're here. Mazel tov. Floor 4. Mind the door.
Do people speak to each other in this lift very much?
Sometimes, when we know each other.
Yeah.
Podium floor. Ground floor.
We've got a sauna and jacuzzi in the flat. You know, just the basics. Really enjoy it. And it seems to be a really nice flat. Sorry, excuse me? Got a sauna and jacuzzi in the flat. It may seem unbelievable in this block, but the old flat was really nice.
Have you had a few too many beers tonight?
I've had a few because I quit my job yesterday. I'm going to be starting a new job in a couple of weeks. I've been out celebrating tonight.
This is on the approach. I just thought because, you know, here Marc is now a presence and there's an intervention, and I just wonder how your approach is governed by that.
I mean, maybe I should start with the Lift film because approach is something that you and all of you will just discover for yourselves. You know, my approach is just my approach, and it's something that's developed and not, you know, not very consciously, more just in a reaction to being out there with a camera and filming and reacting and deciding on, you know, how do I get more out of the situation if I'm not happy with what's going on. You know, how do I relate to the characters? Where am I in this situation? You know, but that has been learned and is always being learned just by doing it. And in the Lift, I realised very quickly this wasn't going to be an observational film. That you know, after a few days, I was bored out of my mind and nothing was happening. And yet at the same time, I had some amazing moments that really, really were, you know, special. And then I started to panic about narrative, and you know, that then sort of fed into my approach, and I started to do things, learn things about the characters outside of the Lift. I brought things into the Lift that I'd discovered outside, and so this whole process of intervention opened up for me. And one of the reasons why I had confidence to do that was through working with Pawel Pawlikowski on some fiction films. And you know, before that, I'd worked with British directors who were trained at the BBC and quite straight in their approach. The films were fine, but they weren't really, I don't know, they weren't as innovative as what I discovered through working with someone like Pawel. And suddenly, you know, rules that were in my head, even sort of subconsciously, you know, I just sort of chucked them out and felt it freed me up to try things that perhaps I wouldn't have if I hadn't had that education. And it was like sort of film school for me. So, you know, I just felt free to ignore what a documentary should be or what I thought it should be, and just treat it as a film. And, you know, find the best methods. You know, it raises ethical and moral concerns in a documentary, and I'm the only judge of that and how that works. I mean, you judge it later on, but I have to make those decisions, at the time, and you know, and live with the consequences of it. But it comes out, you know, of a need to take the reality and push it to another level that, for me, you know, turns me on. Otherwise, it's just so depressing that often the reality is so limited and so, you know, just banal, and you know, for me, I'm forced to find other ways to deal with restrictions and limitations. An example, you know, in the Lift film, I mean, I don't know, even on a sort of more simple level, Lily, when she comes in and reacts like that, it's only because we've had a dialogue before and she's sort of wound up, and later on she comes in and, you know, starts sort of having a go at me, and it's a lot of stuff that's gone on off camera, you know, and of course nothing's, you know, nothing sort of truthful and real in that sense, and there's all kinds of other elements that come into play, and it's, for me it's just a sort of logical extension of that.
The clip we'll show next is one that again encapsulates all the things that I think we should discuss in approach. You know, it's wonderful because you meet an important character. It's wonderful because after you see it, you'll see that you judge the character, but then as you go through the film, it challenges your prejudices about the character. There's also an example in there of where something unexpected happens and how that's dealt with, and also what Marc was talking about, on intervention, a kind of setting up of the scene in a certain way. So if we could just see clip 6, which is from Calais. It's a slightly longer clip than the rest, so. But it covers a lot of things, so I think it's worth looking at.
Hello. Hello. We have to assume you're Steve.
Yeah.
Leslie. Leslie. To you. Shall we sit down somewhere and talk?
Yeah.
Yeah? Where?
Pick your seat.
Pick a seat. Okay. You can't do anything. No, I'll go here. How long have you had this place?
Since August.
How are you doing?
So. Yeah.
Well, there's no lack of bars in Calais.
That's the problem.
There's just a lack of Brits. And I'll tell you one thing, we have never had it so quiet.
Yeah.
And we've been in this business now in Calais for 10 years. We've never experienced anything like it. Look, these are the kind of people that we work with. Look, Pidou, double page spread, Lido in Paris, you know, for Christmas and all this sort of thing. Cheers. Oh, yeah, okay. Now, what can we do for you? Apart from taking your money, I mean. I'm very good at that. Very good at that.
Look, I'll just see this.
Yeah.
I gave you a packet yesterday. Allez, ben non, hein.
Mais c'est peut-être que je pourrais le prendre après.
Hein?
Non mais... je vais faire tomber, ben là, projecteur.
Say bonjour in English.
Bon, demain c'est bon.
Demain, ouais. Oh, he walks around all the cafes all day long, getting cigarettes, to get a cigarette and a coffee.
I think there's only one avenue for you to go down. You want to attract, obviously, the young crowd.
Yeah, that's where we play music.
You don't want people of our age group sitting here with a cup of coffee all day, do you?
No, anybody's welcome, but
right.
with weekends we have DJs.
Yeah, okay, all right, so you want the young crowd. The young crowd, between inverted commas, is the internet. Right. Now, we've got our own website. Now, what we can do with that website is create a page for you. We take a photo inside, take a photo outside. You and your partner, you know, dress yourself up a bit, you know.
Chef's hat, if you like.
You know, come to the zoo in Calais. What I've done, because we don't do it for less, because you can't, less than a year contract. It's a yearly contract that you have. And what it happens is, you get your full page with your banner, you get your database, you got your 10,000 emails that go out, okay? Interested?
I am, yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you. I've got my calculator with me. Right, now, I'll put it on. 2750, that's for the whole year. That's €52 a week it costs you. I think you should be able to afford that. It's not bad, is it?
No.
You know?
If you brought in 10 people a day or 3 people a day,
I know.
cover that.
I know. Well, there you are.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
We'll do business with it.
Hello.
I'm sure you picked up all the Is it scripted? Is it set up?
There's so much in that for me. I was just sort of taking notes, thinking through what's going on there. I mean, first of all, I should say that we've met Steve in the film before, and we've met this bar. We understand that it's not really working out. We kind of get a sense that this is a godforsaken place to be in. I'd met Tulia, tried to film a couple of scenes with her about, to set her up as a character that were quite dull. We discarded them in the editing, chose this way of meeting her. I decided that I wanted her to go into Steve's bar because, she does that anyway, but she just didn't do it with the character in my film, so I wanted her to do that as a way of bringing her into the story. But I didn't know that when I was shooting that it would be a first scene. And then Steve already knew that his bar was probably going to, he was going to close down and leave town. But he agreed to kind of see her. So there was, a little bit cruel in the sense that I was setting up Tulia to go in there knowing that she wasn't going to sell anything to him. But the reason why I'd done that was because, this sort of the larger themes in the film about, being this place that was sort of dying and people in this stuck in this situation. When the line about, come to the zoo in Calais, there is a sense in the film that people are stuck in this space, and they're waiting for the next sort of chapter of their lives to unfold. And then, the moment where the French guy comes in, it's just sort of, being open to surprise. I've just spoken about a lot of construction, a lot of setting up, and then letting the reality unfold. Of course, I didn't know how they were going to relate to each other. I was just hoping that something interesting would come out of it. And in the same way, when that guy came in to ask for cigarettes, I could have stopped filming and viewed it as an interruption to the scene, but there's a lesson in just sort of being open to surprises as well. Once you've got something up and running, in the City film that I've just made, there's another example of that, which I won't talk about now. But if you see the film, you'll kind of understand it when you see it. And then, at the end of the scene, there's a to meet somebody like that in that way, Tulia, people often say that they're slightly repulsed by her, or she's very aggressive, but later on we really get to know her in another way, and people often say that they were really challenged in the way that they sort of first viewed her, and just the shot at the end of her walking off with her husband there just allows you a bit of time to reflect on what you've just seen, and we continue to follow her in the film in the next scene, and something else starts to open up.
It's interesting because it also, the way that scene's constructed for me, you've given them the space to connect somehow without us realizing it. And I think when we go into post-production and talk about editing and putting things together, we should cover that a little more because it's an important part of your work.
I won't go into I wrote about the editing here just now, but there's, we can save that for a little bit later.
So a lot of the narrative, you're saying, is constructed through...
Well, it's sort of feeling of, I was really, I was always thinking about how there's 4 or 5 characters in this film, and how are they going to kind of talk to each other? Yeah. They, in the same way that Paul's, stuck in this sort of bus stop world, Steve is stuck in his bar. Tulia is slightly different because it's more of a psychological state that she's in. She lives in the town centre, and the space in which we see her in the film is slightly less defined. She's much more part of the town. She's been there, and she walks through the town. But I was always thinking, how am I going to get these characters to talk to each other? Later on, I think we've got a clip that really nails that down, not just in the shooting, but in the editing and the construction of the story, really, and the construction of time and space, and the feeling that these characters exist in the same world and their stories are unfolding, in parallel.
So in terms of narrative, is there anything you'd like to ask, or in terms of the filming of it, things like what do you film on, or is there anything that you feel you'd like to know? Is there any? Hi. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I have a question. When you're talking to somebody, you can usually tell if you agree with them, what they're saying, or if you don't agree. And I was wondering if you ever find yourself lying in a way when they're telling you something that seems crazy to you. Would you agree with them to get them to keep going? Or do you let them know in your face if you don't?
It depends on what the situation is. There's always a decision to be made about when, for me, when I will step into a scene or a situation and change it. I think have we got the meal clip? I mean, the dinner clip.
The dinner clip, yeah, but it's
There's
quite long, and
yeah,
I'm not sure we'll
may not
have time.
But there's always, you know, like, I can't remember in that scene that we just saw exactly what I would have done in the moment, but there may have been a point where, for example, the conversation dried up, and I may have then sort of stepped in to sort of provoke some other reactions and to try and get the most out of it. Sometimes if there's people, you know, if people are saying things that I don't agree with, then I may step in and challenge it. But it's just a question of when you do it. I mean, in the Barking film that I made, there's a sort of a very clear moment where we're seeing a guy who we meet and we understand that he's, you know, not too fond of his black neighbours, and a whole discourse opens up around race. And towards the end of the scene, I mean, a lot of the scene's observational in the sense that he's talking to his daughter. And then at the end of the scene, I step in and challenge him and don't hide what I think. I don't impose my own views on him, but I'm, you know, inquisitive, and I'm trying to understand why he thinks the way he does. So it just depends on the situation, but I wouldn't, you know, I don't know when I will feel that. It will just happen, you know. It will just, you know. Usually, if it runs out of steam on you know, by itself, then I might kind of try and add something to it. But it's horses for courses in a way.
Anyone else? Well, can I ask what you would do? Do you, yes, in that kind of situation?
Well, I just finished a film where I had one main character, and I disagreed with him completely on his religious views, and he didn't know that when I went into the film, and I had access to him because he thought I was on his side in a way. So I felt a lot of the times that I was kind of lying, and that's why I ask.
Is there another question? There, please.
Hi, I'm Paula Nightingale. You said something very interesting. You said, when you were talking about intervention, you said something along the lines of, you make your decision and then you have to live with the consequences.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering what kind of consequences there might be. Are you purely talking about narrative consequences, or is it sometimes something that you feel you've gone a provocation too far, or?
No, I mean, you know, there's a lot that goes into sort of setting something up. So I mean, there are consequences that exist outside of the frame, you know, in terms of the relationships with characters, but usually you wouldn't get too, if I suggested something that was completely off the wall, then people make it very clear that, you know, it's not on and they're not going to do it. But I mean, it doesn't usually happen. I'm not stupid enough to misjudge the situation completely and suggest something that's going to offend somebody. It's much more sort of narrative and believability in the film. You know, I mean, in a scene like that with Tulia, you know, I hope that people who watch the film don't care that it's a setup in that way, and they can just go with the story of it and the, you know, the greater truth of it, if you like, without sounding too pretentious, rather than worrying about the mechanics of that setup. But it only works if the scene works. You know, if you start to feel something happens, if it takes you outside, then you've lost it. You know, sometimes I may try things that don't work, but you know.
And can you go back in again, or does it? You've lost the moment in it.
Well, you know, with you know, an editor, you can
create.
I mean, you know, for example, there's so many shots in that scene we just watched that, you know, would have come from different moments, and you know, either sort of a cutaway of the guy in there, or when we see Steve's partner briefly. You know, all these things exist in the rushes from another day. You know, and So.
We're really lucky, can I just introduce David, to have David Sharap here, who not only has a long editing relationship with Marc, but I just, I think it'd be great because we can then really understand rather than my trying to understand. So perhaps, I think if we looked at a particular clip, and this clip is the one where we learn a number of things about the scene, the narrative, and the characters. It's a long clip, but I think it's worth doing. It's a sequence in Barking where we first meet a character called Dave, and you'll see in the way it's constructed that he's a representative of kind of the indigenous population, and also well, sorry, I'll stop. Please, could we have clip 8?
Who's supposed to be moving in?
I don't know. Clive seems to think there was a black woman and kids moving in. That's the one who lives the other side.
Yeah. Would that bother you or not?
As long as they're quiet and they don't interfere with me, I don't care.
Would you rather a white family move in then?
Yeah, I suppose if it was mostly black round here, they'd prefer a black person to move in. Of course you prefer to live amongst your own. Well, I do anyway. Oh, look, here's Marc. Who's this then, eh? Let's have a look at you. Let's have a look at you. Come on in. Oh! Oh! What's the matter? Hey?
Your grandson, Dave?
Yeah?
You look lovely today.
Charlie,
Yeah.
why would I prefer my own type of people to move next door?
I don't think you'd mind black people who've been born in this country who were westernised. But when it comes to all the different cultures who don't speak English, a lot of them can be very arrogant, and I'm speaking from first-hand experience there.
What's your first-hand experience?
My son's father is African. He wasn't born in this country, he was born in Nigeria.
And he's a fucking dog.
You can't speak like that.
Okay.
He's...
What do you do to you?
I'm actually in safe housing now. This is the only place I can come to in this borough because he beat me up. He was very controlling.
How did you feel, Dave, when your daughter had a relationship with Nigeria?
As long as she was happy, I was okay.
What didn't you like about it?
Because I would prefer her to marry someone of her own religion, her own race and religion.
But at the end of the day, even you said yourself, you don't mind what colour the next person that I meet is, as long as they treat me right.
Did you ever meet...
No, and I didn't want to. Because I knew it was going to end up in grief.
It would have been nice if we could have all been a family together, but that was never meant to be.
How did you feel when you found out she was having a kid with a Nigerian?
Didn't like it. I don't believe in abortion, so there was only one thing she could do. And she doesn't anyway.
What was it that you didn't agree with? What can you...
I don't believe in mixed marriages. I don't believe in mixed relationships. Because they don't work. It's the kids that suffer.
He won't suffer.
He will.
No, he won't. No more than what...
Listen, Charlie. No matter what race there is on this earth, there's bigots in every race.
Yeah, but there's
and he's going to come across some of them bigots.
But at the end of the day, right,
No.
he's going to face...
No, I'm not having an argument.
No, I'm not having
Keep
an
your voice
argument.
down.
No, but I'm just saying, right, There's black people who don't like white people. There's white people who don't like black people. There's racist people in every single culture.
What did I just say?
No, but everyone comes across bigots in their life.
Yeah, but more so him. More so because he's mixed race.
No, I don't think that because...
No, you don't think it, because you've not lived long enough.
No.
I've seen it all my life.
Yeah, but Dad, in today's society, there's more mixed race people than there was in your day.
Well, we just see we see what happens then. Hey.
But at the end of the day, Dad, you're saying you don't agree with mixed race
I don't agree with it. I know I'd have preferred you to, and I still prefer you to meet one of our own, but you're not. You've got a preference for sunburned people, so... See, nothing wrong with preference, is there? Hey.
I don't know, I'm confused about...
No, there's nothing to be
confused about why you have this...
No, I've got nothing against it. Well, you see, yeah, listen, it's preference.
Yeah, but what does it mean? What does preference mean, though? There must be some...
I'd be more comfortable if one of my own lived next door. That's nothing to do with racism or anything of the sort. It's just personal preference.
But you don't know that person more than any...
I don't care whether I know him or not. I still prefer my own people.
But why?
Because it's my personal preference. I don't know why, but it's my preference.
So it's almost irrational. It comes from somebody...
Nothing rational about it. I'm being perfectly rational. This is England.
This is bacon. You get 5 packs for £3. Have a look. Fat bacon. Really, really nice. You know those short dumpling spicy sausages? Lovely.
You know, that scene, although we'll talk about it, and there's intervention and all those things, the point is you still remain true to the bigger idea of what you're trying to say with this film. And that, for me, is a real, you know, it's quite wonderful. And it's obviously to do with their relationship and how they see things. The question is, you touched on this before, Mark, does your editing, say on All White and Barking, did that begin before you finished filming?
Yeah, we had 2 editing sessions and appendicitis in between or something, as far as I remember. So we'd done a few weeks whilst I couldn't shoot because I was laid up, and we had quite a long break, and then we'd done another 4 or 5 weeks. So there was a lot of, you know, we had a rough cut with lots of holes at one point.
But even before that, I remember a conversation in a pub when you said you were filming in Barking and met all these characters, but were searching for ways of trying to pull them together to make the film unite, and you mentioned that there was an African butcher's and a English butcher's, and that there were these sort of leftover meat being sold off in the street. And I suddenly started getting very excited because it struck me as obvious that everybody eats meat, apart from vegetarians like myself, but everybody in Barking eats meat, and suddenly there's a way of pulling all these people together. Everybody gets their meat in a different form. And we're always looking for ways of making these small individual stories have a wider resonance. And I remember at that point starting to, you know, be able to glimpse the film that hadn't yet been filmed. And it's great as an editor to be part of that early creative process, because then when the director does turn up with a stack of videotapes, you've got some idea what you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's a 5-minute sequence, and you know, you see from the beginning people moving out of the area. You know, it just puts all those things, I think, wonderfully together. So,
Well, I mean, in terms of editing Marc's work, and he said earlier that because of Pawel, his approach to documentary is just to treat it like a film. Like any film, as an editor, my job is to try to make sure the viewer is getting information in the right order, that the cards that we're playing start to take the viewer into the heart of a journey. And I hope that clip works like that for you, that the very first thing is his neighbours are moving out. So he's right from the start put on edge. And then the next thing that you know about him, you probably won't, if you haven't seen the film before, you may not have picked up straight away, is because of adding sounds of a dishwasher in the background and the kettle beginning to boil, you have this sense of a man under tension. And I think what's exciting as an editor working in this sort of documentary is that you're both doing the usual stuff of trying to cut things down, but also able to draw on techniques and devices that perhaps are more common in fiction film to make the story resonate more. And then, as one goes through the scene, obviously the kid poking his head around the back, that was a single moment. But hopefully, by the way in which we keep cutting back to it, each time we do, you as a viewer make it mean something more. And for me, the whole point of Marc's filmmaking is it's you, the viewer, who's making the film mean anything. And as soon as you're doing the work, rather than a commentator telling you what it's all about, then the film actually has a life of its own.
I couldn't have put it more eloquently myself.
Also because, you know, this is the heart of what you see. Maybe we should take some questions now on this element, because there's another thing we're going to show you after this, which moves it to a completely different dimension. So is there anything you'd like to ask now? Yes, please.
Hi, just how did you guys meet and develop your working relationship?
I once came into David's cutting room when he was cutting a fiction film called Last Resort, and we met in that situation. And David didn't cut the Lift film that I made, but he cut the second film, Travellers. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's developing a relationship with an editor is sometimes it happens, and probably for some filmmakers it never happens, and they change constantly, and it's sort of a fluke in a way. And we met and we clicked, and if you get a chance to do a second and a third film together, then it you know, hopefully it really sort of, you start to understand each other. I mean, we probably don't talk about things as much as what we did the first time we worked together, because we don't really need to, you know. It's, you know, there's an understanding there, which is great. You know, it's brilliant when it works. It's you know, I really feel that, you know, David, you know, is 50, this is sort of an equal split. You know, I'm out there shooting and reacting to the world, but at some point I hand all this over, and it's, you know, then I'm totally comfortable with and confident that David is going to understand and pull out what, you know, make something coherent about the sort of all the confusing thoughts that I'm having when I'm out there filming and deciding what to film, and, you know.
I think what's really lovely about a relationship that we've built up over a number of films is obviously there's a lot of trust, but it means also that there's quite a long period when Marc is leaving me to deal with the material alone. And that's, I mean, it's scary, but it also means that he can then be much more effective when he sees a cut down first assembly in recognizing what's there, what I've left out, but also moving on to the next stage. I think often, particularly student filmmakers, are very precious about the ownership of their material, and by sitting on top of an editor or being too intimately involved with every single editing decision, you actually lose a sense of the film as a whole. And it's when the two of us, when we've gone through that initial cut, it's when the two of us are really playing with the material and we're both completely familiar with all the material that's there, all the options that we've taken, then I mean, it's really great fun. I mean, it's a dance, you know.
I mean, I remember in the beginning, I mean, it does take time to establish, because, I mean, you know, David's not slow in coming forward what he thinks about the material. And the first times that happened, it's like a knife to the heart. I mean, you're like, ooh, and it really kind of gets you, and after a while, you know, all your ego and all your pride or whatever, now I'm just totally honest, and I don't feel, if David thinks something's shit, I don't take it personally, and if anything, I'm happy to throw away most of what I've shot. You know, I know what works, I know what's good, and you know, I know what's going to stick, and I'm just, you know, totally relaxed to leave David alone and come in a few days later and see something that he's created. You know, and that's, for me, that's like amazing. It's sort of, God, I had an idea that it could be something like that, but that's taken it to another level.
And you have close relationships because with, I mean, music, editing, and what you film in music is really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that we don't have a little bit more time, because Mish, the composer that I work with, is here, and you've heard music along the way today in some of the clips, and that's also a really important element of, you know, Mish will always moan about how late he's called in, because we can only really call him in when we feel like we understand the film that we're making. And in the last film, where there's 18 music cues, it was a mad rush. But I think we pulled it off, hopefully. You can be the judge of that. But it's another element in the post-production that is really, really important. Which we may have time to focus on in a bit.
There is a question, if we can take that one quickly, and then I have to move on. Behind you. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Quick question to David. When you're going through marked footage and there's a shot that's maybe adds quite a lot but isn't aesthetically right, maybe it's out of focus or, you know, not well framed, I'm sure doesn't happen a lot. I don't know. How do you make that choice? And or do you go with another shot that maybe looks right but doesn't add as much to the story? Is it sometimes a difficult call?
When it comes down to editing decisions on a shot-by-shot basis, obviously, if I've got a beautiful shot that's in focus, if that feels nicer, then I will use it. But there's no hard and fast rules. I mean, I remember on Travellers, the train film, there was a great character who, unfortunately, the entire role was out of focus because of a lens fault on the camera.
It wasn't, he just had eye problems.
Yes, my contact lenses were still. No, and I had to say, look, I'm sorry, Mark, we can't use this, because if you've got a whole character who's out of focus, he's never going to
be in focus.
Be in focus. But when it comes to individual shots and material, the nature of Mark's filming is it's sometimes a bit rough and ready, and in a sense that's part of the charm. You know, as soon as things become too pristine, then they also become lifeless. And my job is to try to find bits of the shots that hold together, so that, you know, don't be too precious would be all I can say.
I'm sorry, we're talking only because I have. If you have a quick one here, please, in front, and then we've only got, I think, another 7 minutes.
Under pressure. That clock's really big.
Neil Baker, filmmaker. I also edit. I was just wanting to know how much influence, David, you have before filming happens in terms of maybe talking to Mark about what type of things for, you know, maybe you talked about a sequence or something, maybe the sort of things that you might want for the edit. Because as a filmmaker who also edits, I always have the edit in my head, but I'm wondering how that relationship works between the two of you.
I mean, we'll have a very early conversation, as David described, about themes. And as, you know, in the last couple of films, we've had this break in the edit, and then conversations about what we need have been quite specific. Sometimes it does my head in a little bit, because David will say, well, you know, just you know, pan down from the sky, you know, and it's like, well, I don't work like that when David hasn't told me what he needs, and it's not very useful to me. And you know, and I'll go out and shoot it, and he won't use it. And
one shouldn't be too prescriptive. It's not my place to do that. But it's interesting that the way in which the edits have evolved is that the shopping list is becoming a little bit more sharper. I don't think it's helpful to be filming precise shots that are already designed, because they're again going to be pristine and therefore lifeless. But when we've left these gaps, it's sometimes quite scary, because obviously it is still a documentary. It is still relying on people's authentic responses. And sometimes it's waiting for reality to catch up. Like in the Barking film, we knew that Dave was going to move from the area, but obviously him moving house wasn't something that would fit into a production schedule necessarily. So we have this card left on the screen in the edit, Dave leaves the area, and we're running out of editing time, and he hasn't.
There is
intervention.
There is one more clip I'd really like to show, because we've got a number more, but we've run out of time. This, for me, is how you take a much bigger idea and it's put together by the editing of disparate elements to a much greater truth. If we could just have clip 9, please. It's like the parallel editing of characters.
Whenever I see the White Cliffs of Dover, it's always special to me. It always brings back good memories, but also very sad ones from the last war. My parents and I, we were interned into political camps in Spain. I was about 9, I should imagine. One particular day, I was separated from my mother in the camp, and we were taken for an outing in a field nearby for some exercise and fresh air and this, that, the other. We were taken there with some guards. There was about 20 children, all separated from their families. And another girl and myself, we decided that we would take that opportunity to escape, to find our mothers, who we knew were in another camp. We didn't know where, of course. At 9 years old, in a strange country with a strange language, you don't know where, but our main concern was escaping from where we were to anything. And so we played hide and seek, and gradually, hiding behind trees and one thing another in bushes, we got away from the main crowd, and we did escape. Of course, in the end, they caught us because 2 children on their own, wandering streets and villages. I can't remember exactly where they caught us.
So you never found your mum?
But we never found that one.
What did your mother look like?
She's looked like my, you can see in my picture, she's looked like me. My father is also looked like me. My brother, my mother, especially his eyes, were very, very, very brown. Look like my eyes. She's very beautiful woman. She is very bold woman. And you can see in my face, she's looked like me. So.
Do you have a photograph of her?
Yes, I have. I had a photographer, but when I came to France, I lost his photographs because I came here in the very difficult ways, very dangerous ways. So I lost that picture. I had one picture of my mother, but at the moment I don't have his picture, her picture. I'm sorry to say it. If I have a picture, I will see you. This is my mother.
When we got to Dover, the British Red Cross met us and took us under their wing, and it was unbelievable. They took us to a flat. Of course, it wasn't the Ritz, but to us it was. When you've come out of a camp, believe you me, anything is the Ritz. As I grew into a young woman, I took some very serious decisions in my life. And one of the decisions was to
And I never wanted any children of my own. Because I never wanted to bring into this world children who might go through what I went through.
Sorry, I always need to make after that.
I mean, when I first saw that, I'll be quick probably, when I first saw that sequence edited, I mean, for me it was a complete surprise. Of course, I'd shot these different elements. I'd done the quite long interview with Tulia, not knowing what I was going to cut away to. And then, the sequence with Ijaz on the beach, and I obviously had lots of shots of refugees wandering around the town, and I'd shot, the town up above from the lighthouse and the clouds, which sort of disappeared on there a little bit. But, and suddenly one day came into the edit, and that was a sequence. And for me, it's like, wow,
I think, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to move to the end, because it's the art of all this put together, and I think you make the most beautiful and humane films. Please do go and see Men of the City today.
I just want to say also that, Mish, we did allow some time for music in this session. It hasn't happened. And it's really important in the Men of the City film, if you're going to go and see that at 12, I think it's... and Mish is going to be around all day, and, why don't you show your face, Mish, and if you want to talk about music, because it's a really important part of the last film and, lots of other films. So, and thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you very much.